I want you to put your hands together and join me now in welcoming our speaker, Steve Blow. Let's welcome Steve. Come and join us.
Hello. Something Adrian didn't tell you is that I am the father to 3 girls. And I would like to tell you some funny stories from when they were small, because everyone enjoys that. When I said to Rebecca the other day, I've got a list of funny stories on my phone, she was like, I don't believe you. And I was like, no, it's for my talk. But I didn't say that bit. Once upon a time, we were out with one of my daughters, and she saw a sign, and it said fishmonger on it. And she said, Daddy, what's a fishmonger? And trying to be a little bit educational, I said, well, monger is a word that means a person who sells things. So what do you think a fishmonger means? And she said, a fish that sells things. It's a good answer, but it was a mistake. Here's another one. We used to have guinea pigs, and one of my daughters used to cuddle the guinea pigs a little too tightly, and it used to keep biting her just here on her chest. And I said to her, why do you think the guinea pig keeps biting you, hoping to get, am I being too rough? Actually, what she said is, well, guinea pigs eat fruits and vegetables, and when I eat my fruits and vegetables, they go down here, and so it must smell it, and so that's why it bites me. Kids make some funny mistakes, but sometimes there's a consequence, right? If you squeeze a guinea pig too hard, you end up with a bite mark in your chest. One of my children made a more serious mistake. She climbed a bookcase to get to some Calpol. For those who don't know that, it's a sweet medicine that kids all love. She climbed to the top, removed the child-proof cap, drank the whole bottle, and there was a consequence, which is, a whole day in hospital whilst we sorted that out. Another time, one of my daughters took a TV remote to the toilet with her to make sure that none of her sisters changed the channel. Of course, she dropped it, and then none of us could watch TV for quite a while. One of my kids loves pepperoni, and she decided she might get hungry at night, so she started stashing pepperoni under her pillow over several nights. She didn't understand things like sell-by dates at that point, so I just remember going in one day and smelling a sort of slightly rank, gone-off meat smell, and that was because it was under the pillow. Finally, once we were washing the car, and the smallest child sitting in the front, practicing driving the car, and she noticed the little pot of money that we used to pay car parking, and she noticed the CD player slot. So while we were washing the car, she was posting coins through the slot. That took the whole electronics part of that car down, so I now can repair that section of a car. That took a few hours. I guess my point is, you love your children, but they make mistakes. And you love them despite those mistakes, but sometimes those mistakes have real consequences. And God is a father. He was a father to the people of Israel. And just like any loving father, his children made mistakes. Over the past few weeks, we've been learning about how God created a special people, took them into a promised land, and he shaped them to set them apart from the other nations around them. He made them a holy people. Today we're going to zoom out. We're going to take a quick overview of 464 years of history, a period where a lot more went wrong than went right. And then we're going to zoom in, and we're going to spend some time with King Solomon, who's one of the more interesting characters, and do a bit of a deep character study. We won't have time to go deep in many places. If you're good at maths, you'll have realized I have to do 16 years a minute, so we'll have to go quite fast at points. But if you like to read some of this stuff for yourself, you'll find it in the Bible. It's in Samuel, it's in Kings, it's in Chronicles. Those are all in the Old Testament. If you like anything you want to hear and you want to go a bit deeper, that's the place to read it. The Israelites began to look around at the nations around them. They saw strong, powerful kings, and they wanted that for themselves. But in asking for a king, they were actually rejecting God. God warned them. He warned them about how kings would lord it over them, how they would tax them, how they would exploit them, how they would oppress them, how they would rule them harshly. The Israelites didn't listen. They said, we want a king over us. Let us be like other nations with a king to lead us, to go out before us and to fight our battles. You see, God was supposed to be the one who fought their battles, but they rejected him. They decided not to be a special people led by God out of a desire to be like everybody else. If you can imagine, that's not a good start to our story. The first king they chose was Saul. Saul's standout qualities were being tall and handsome, a bit like me. No, I'm just joking. But let's be honest, if the reason you pick a boyfriend is because they're tall and handsome, that's the wrong reason to pick. Look for something deeper. It's a terrible reason to pick a king, right? Tall and handsome, not great qualities. The truth is his character was deeply flawed. He was jealous. He disobeyed God. He was impatient. He was moody. He was unstable. Ultimately, he was a bad king. Then came David. If this is your very first time in church, you've probably heard of David. He's the famous shepherd boy who killed Goliath. We could easily spend a whole 13 weeks talking about David. He's a really interesting guy, but we've got 1 minute. David was a man after God's own heart. He was dedicated to God. He was faithful. He was courageous. He was a warrior. He was a worshiper, and he unified the tribes of Israel. But he also made some really serious mistakes. You can read about those if you want to. But every time he made a mistake, he turned back to God. He repented. Then we moved to Solomon. Solomon ruled over what's called the Golden Age of Israel. We're going to come back to that later and look at that in more detail. But when Solomon died, the Golden Age of Israel came to an end. If you take a look at this map, there's a red area. That was the kingdom of Israel that David inherited. The orange area, that's how David expanded it. And that bit of the yellow that stretches off the map, that was what Solomon ruled over. But when that rule came to an end, the kingdom divided. When kingdoms divide, that means usually something very serious has happened. And we're going to talk about why that happened in a bit. Before we start looking at the individual kingdoms of Israel, we're going to talk a little bit about idolatry. And the reason we need to talk about that is a theme that comes up again and again and again in what we're going to hear. Depending on your background, the word idolatry might not mean much to you. For some, it might conjure up images of people praying to golden statues or icons. But there's a reason it was deeply disallowed in the Bible, and that reason is completely relevant today. Because the truth is, at its core, idolatry is about devoting yourself to something more than God. In the biblical context, it often meant worshipping other gods, and it was very much like having a spiritual affair. It was a betrayal of that covenant relationship between the people of Israel and God. The worship of idols often involved some pretty horrific requirements as well. There were things like child sacrifice. There were things like ritual prostitution. It was a pretty gross thing in many respects. People worshipped idols because of the things that they could get. There were fertility idols, idols who would give you power, prosperity, safety, military success. Now, in the UK today, most of us don't bow down to statues or icons, but idolatry is still very much alive because we see it in the pursuit of wealth, in the pursuit of possessions, in the desire for success, power, achievement, recognition, influence. We see it in the craving for social media likes. We see it in escapism, in entertainment, in the longing for our comfort and safety, in the worship of our own wellness, in investing in our bodies, building them up and making ourselves beautiful. We see it in the belief that a perfect romantic partner can complete us. We see it sometimes in the idolization of our own children. We see it in influences we follow, in ideologies, social movements, and even religious institutions. There are many things we can put above God, and many of them aren't inherently bad. It's putting them above God that's the problem. Before we carry on with our story, take a moment and think about what sort of idolatry might you most be prone to. Because when I say they worshipped a golden calf as an idol, that might not mean too much to you. But if instead you hear they prioritized their careers over the kingdom of God, that might make some of the story a little bit more relevant for you today. Okay, we're going to go quite fast here. There's going to be a lot of slides. If they're helpful, they're helpful. If they're not, they're not. And you might notice there's a scoreboard at the bottom. If a king was evil, he's going to get a point in the bad column. If a king was good, he's going to get a point in the good column. And if it's half and half, it's half a point either way. You might say, it's not very kind to judge kings. I mean, there literally are lines in there saying, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. I feel like you can give him a bad point if it says that. Okay, we're going to look at the northern kingdom. We're going to go quite quick. We've got a lot of kings to cover. And I really need my notes for this part. Jeroboam led the nation into widespread idolatry and set the stage for spiritual decline. His son Nadab, actually, if it's helpful to see, these people were all grouped in families. So every time a slide moves, that's a family over. Jeroboam led the nation into idolatry. His son Nadab continued doing that, and then he was assassinated 2 years later. The king who replaced him, the guy who killed him, no surprise, you start your rule by killing someone, more violence as that went on, and plenty of idolatry. His son Eliah Same story, more idolatry, also killed by his chariot commander. Chariot commander, 7 whole days, overthrown by Omri. Zimri actually killed himself by setting himself on fire. The Bible can be quite brutal when you read it. There's some interesting parts in there. It's not going very well so far. 5 bad kings, 0 good ones. Omri, former charioteer, successful militarily, but steeped in idolatry and promoted worship of foreign gods. Now, we move here from a spiritual affair into full-blown divorce. We have Ahab. The Bible says he did even more evil in the eyes of the Lord. He married Jezebel. You might have heard of her. That's quite a famous name. Together, they were actively opposed to the worship of Yahweh. At this point, they start killing prophets and persecuting those who believe God. It's getting really serious. Interestingly, Jezebel has one of the most extreme deaths in the Bible. She gets thrown out of a window, trampled by horses, and then eaten by dogs, which, that's a lot. Isaiah continued the extreme idolatry. Jehoram, he tried to distance himself slightly from his family's evil practices, but didn't go anywhere near far enough. And then we get Jehu. He's going to get half a point because he overthrew the dynasty, he toppled the Baal worship, and then he went back into idolatry. Then we have Jehoahaz, continued idolatry. We had Joash, who restored the temple, but continued in his idolatry. Then we have more idolatry, more assassinations, a 1-month rule, more cruelty, more assassinations, and then we end up with a bad alliance, and eventually the whole kingdom is taken over by the Syrian Empire, with much of the population being forcibly taken into exile. Happy stuff. At that point, I can't go any further in the story. We've been passing this baton, and that's going to go to Lynn next. It's the God Story baton. I have 3 girls. It's now extremely colourful. But onwards we go. So we've done the northern kingdom. We're going to do the southern kingdom now. The southern kingdom is called Judah. We begin with Rehoboam. His hard leadership was so severe, it cracked the kingdom in half. Then came Abijah. He was actively at war with the northern kingdom, so you have people related, fighting each other. Then we get a good king, a properly good king, Asa. Asa removed the idols and restored the worship of God. Yes. Then we get Jehoshaphat, second good king in a row. He strengthened Judah, promoted the worship of God, invested in education for all the people. It's going well. And then we get Jehoram, reign marked by warfare and idolatry. Then we get Uzziah, who ruled really briefly. Again, more idolatry. And then we get the only ruling queen. Do we want to cheer for the ruling queen? Yeah, that was a trick. You weren't supposed to cheer. She seized power by killing off all the royal family. She murdered her grandchildren. So don't cheer for the queen. But there was one survivor who was her rightful heir. That was Joash. He started well. He repaired the temple. He initiated religious reforms. But later in life, back into idolatry. Amaziah initially followed God, turned to idolatry, assassinated. Uzziah had a long, prosperous reign, good king, faithful to God, made a mistake at the end, but generally a good king. Jotham, his son, also a good king. Then came Ahaz. We've had 2 kings in a row. We're on a streak. Now we're back to idolatry. We've got someone who boarded up the king's temple, burned one of his own children as a sacrifice, partnered up with the Assyrians to bring about the downfall of the northern kingdom, generally a bad guy. Then we had Hezekiah, reformer, pushed back against Assyria, restored the temple, got rid of the idols, and was a good king. Then we have Manasseh, back to idolatry, back to evil practices, but he's that one king who turned back at the end of his life and actually started being a good king, but then his son came along and was evil. Josiah, last good king, and then the last 4 kings are embroiled in a struggle. They're trying to keep Judah going, but actually what's happening is they're being taken over by Babylon. Jerusalem gets destroyed. They all get taken off to Babylon. It's gone really wrong. In the south, we had 6.5 good kings and 12.5 bad ones. But if we zoom out, it's a pretty poor picture. We have 464 years with 41 rulers. Less than 1 in 5 is any good. Jerusalem's destroyed. God's people are exiled. This is supposed to be God's chosen people. They've borne a heavy consequence for what's gone wrong. Now, I must drink something because that was fast. We'll slow down now. About 2,900 years ago in Israel, King David died. His son Solomon took over. Solomon began his reign with a dream, and it was an amazing dream. In that dream, God offered him anything he wanted. He asked for the ability to govern his people justly. He could have asked for a long life. He could have asked for peace. He could have asked for a lifetime supply of Pepsi. That wasn't invented. But he asked for the ability to govern his people justly. A humble, selfless request. He chose something that would benefit the world more than him. He did right in God's eyes. And I get that. Have you ever taken on a grown-up responsibility? Maybe you've got promoted. Maybe you've started managing some people. Maybe you've had a baby. And you think, I do not know if I can do this. God, will you help me? Solomon did the right thing. He humbled himself. He realized he didn't know what he was doing. He asked for wisdom. God was pleased. And because Solomon asked for such a good thing, God blessed him with all the things that he didn't ask for. Although I made a joke about Pepsi. He didn't get that. I shouldn't have made that joke. I've realized that now. Solomon became known far and wide for his huge judgment, extraordinary insight, and he had a reign that lasted 40 years. And get this, his father David before him, he ruled for 40 years. They had a war every 4 years. Solomon reigned, no wars, 40 years, enormous time of peace, but also a huge time of prosperity. Israel entered into trade arrangements with all sorts of nations around them, and they became wealthy. His diplomatic skills were a key reason for this. He helped reduce conflict. His wisdom helped with that, and his wealth would have demonstrated to others God's blessing over the kingdom of Israel. He was a prolific writer. There's several books in the Bible that he contributed to. He's authored wise sayings, songs, philosophical writings. If you want to read some of those, you'll find them in Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. The clue's in the name. He was a builder as well. He fortified cities. He constructed aqueducts. He built roads. He did infrastructure that made significant contribution to Israel's success and prosperity. But his most significant thing was the construction of the temple. David, his father, had been a man after God's own heart, and he thought it was wrong that the Ark of the Covenant, just to remind you what that is, the Ark of the Covenant, golden, highly decorated box, which the presence of God was in and around, and if you touched it, you dropped dead. Holy, holy, holy important thing. David recovered that as part of his reign, but the Ark was living in a tent, and David didn't think it was right that they were all now living in houses, and the presence of God was living in a tent, so he desired to build a temple. He started putting things aside, but he found out that because of all the people he'd killed militarily, he wasn't going to be the one who was going to build the temple. That was going to pass to his son. So he squirreled away lots of the materials that were going to be needed to undertake this thing. And it was Solomon who got to build it. Now, this was a huge undertaking. They were building a building that was designed to reflect the glory of God. It required huge resources, collaboration of thousands of craftsmen, artists, builders from both Israel and the surrounding nations. The artisans worked tirelessly. They created intricate designs, embedded precious materials throughout, gilded it with gold. It was a luxury palace for God. The architecture was a masterpiece. The walls were adorned with gold. Everything gleamed. It symbolized the people's reverence towards their God. At the heart of the temple was a sacred space called the Holy of Holies. And when the Ark of the Covenant was placed there, the whole nation gathered to worship God as that was placed there. And an amazing thing happened. A cloud descended, and the priests couldn't even stand as God's holiness came, and they all joined together and they sang worship to God. It really is a pinnacle of worship in the life of Israel. That area in the temple had to be closed off with a thick curtain. The presence of God there was so strong that only the high priest could go there once a year. Going in there any other time would cause you to be killed. They even had to tie a rope around his waist in case he died so they could drag him back out again. It was an amazing place. If we stop there, what an amazing life Solomon's led. Not many people can say they've done something like that. Unfortunately, the outwardly prosperous, peaceful and successful reign was marked with lots of compromise. His first wife was from Egypt. Inherently, maybe that doesn't seem like a problem, but the people of Israel were called to live a life set apart, and they were warned that marrying into other nations and even trading with other nations would create the likelihood that idolatry would come into their kingdom. Despite all of his wisdom, Solomon decided to ignore that warning. And some people collect things. Solomon collected wives. And you can kind of get it, right? Different time, different place. If I marry this person's daughter, I secure a trade agreement. If I marry this person's daughter, we get peace. If I marry this person, well, she's just hot. So he's doing all sorts of marriages. It's a strategic way to ensure stability for the nation. And maybe because he was so wise, he thought he could ignore God's warnings about intermarrying. He blew through that limit, didn't he, marrying 700 people. I thought about it. If you had dinner with one wife a day, it would take 2 years to talk to them all. It's a staggering undertaking, and the proposal might have gone something like this. Hi, Jessica. Would you do me the most important honor of my life and become my 454th wife? I don't know if you had to queue them up. It's logistically hard to imagine. Actually, it probably went like this. I'm one of the wealthiest people in the world. I've got $1 billion worth of gold, and your dad really wants to do a trade deal with me. Let's get married. Not very romantic, but it is what it was. However, the Israelites really had been warned not to marry foreigners. And you know what they say, happy wife, happy life? In his desire to keep his wives happy, he was tempted by idolatry. You know, they needed a place for their worship, and pretty soon he was joining in. We know under his reign that the people engaged in the worship of Ashtoreth. She was a god of fertility rites, and that involved ritual prostitution. They also worshipped Molech. He was infamous for child sacrifice. Children were burned as offerings. They worshipped Chemosh, a god associated with human sacrifice. Solomon had raised a temple to the Lord, and yet he was raising altars to these disgusting idols in the kingdom of Israel. That was not his job. Solomon spent 7 years planning his temple. It was a massive undertaking. It required careful planning and logistics. And you see all the industry that would have to go into it. You'd need to set up supply chains for boulders to be turned into stone. You'd need huge quantities of gold, bronze, linen, timber. Thousands of people were involved in the construction. They all needed to be trained in these artisan skills. David had done a lot of the legwork. He'd stored some stuff up, but it was a huge undertaking. However, once it was done, you've got all these artisans, you've got all these rocks, you've got all these quarries. Solomon sat down and thought, time to have a palace for me. The proportions are wrong, though. The temple took 7 years. Solomon's temple, palace to himself, 13 years. Did he just go slower? No, he wanted something twice as big. It was the same level of luxury, but it was multiple buildings, living quarters for all those 1,000 people and all the children. He built a temple to himself. And you can understand that, right? I've been to Buckingham Palace. It's pretty grand. When people come and see it, you say, oh, yeah, the UK is doing very, very well. Maybe he thinks he needs this glorious palace so people can say Israel's a powerful nation, you should be peaceful. We understand that. Here's the real problem. Solomon's building programs were so extensive that 30,000 Israelites were forced into forced labor. Forced labor is a code word for slavery. They were required to work 1 month out of every 3 on his projects. Now remember, the Israelites had once been slaves in Egypt, and it was forbidden to enslave the Israelites. Yet in order to complete his grand designs, Solomon enslaved some of God's people. Now you can argue, if it's 1 month in 3, technically is it slavery? Top tip, if you start saying technically is it wrong with God, it is. But Solomon was meant to care for his people. He wasn't meant to enslave them. He was one of the richest people who ever lived, and he showed it off. But all that wealth came at a cost. Someone had to pay for all of Solomon's grand projects, and it ended up being God's chosen people. They were required to give up portions of their own wealth to make their king richer. Solomon grew wealthy on the backs of his people. Instead of lifting them up, he oppressed them. These last 2 issues, forced labor and heavy taxation, directly led to the split of Israel. His son, who inherited the kingdom when Solomon died, people were like, please, please end this. Instead, he doubled down, the gravy train carried on, the kingdom split, and idolatry was sown through the kingdom. What can we learn from Solomon? God doesn't want you to build a kingdom through compromise. Solomon tried to mix his devotion with diplomacy. He built a temple, but he built altars to foreign gods. He honored Yahweh, he embraced idolatry. The compromise didn't affect him, it affected the whole of Israel and all of their future. We might not be building temples, we might not be building palaces, but we're all building something. Our lives, our families, our workplaces, our communities. And the question is, are we building with integrity? Are we cutting corners? Are we making peace with things we know aren't right? God doesn't want your half-hearted devotion. He wants your whole heart. He wants you to build with purity, not with compromise. Wisdom isn't enough. Obedience matters. Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. He wrote Proverbs. He understood human nature. He could discern right from wrong, but knowing the right thing and doing the right thing can be two different things. You can have all this insight on the world, and if you don't act on it, it's just theory. Think about your own lives. Are there areas where you know where God is asking you to do something, but you're hesitating? Maybe it's a relationship that needs to be healed. Maybe it's a habit you need to break. Maybe it's a call that you're avoiding. Wisdom's a gift. Obedience is a choice. And it's obedience that leads to transformation. Talent and success are not substitutes for character. Solomon had it all, literally. Wealth, fame, influence. I was going to say beautiful women, but there were 1,000. It was probably a mix. People traveled from distant lands just to hear him speak. But his character didn't keep pace with his success. That's a warning for us. You can be celebrated by the whole world and be drifting from God. You could be applauded for your achievements, but still be hollow inside. God doesn't care about your CV. He cares about your character. Cultivate godly character. Be someone who tells the truth when it's hard. Choose kindness when it costs you. Walk humbly even when people praise you. And finish well. Solomon started strong. He had a dream, a calling, a divine encounter. Some of you will have that. But he didn't finish well, and that's heartbreaking. It caused a nation to break. It can be easy to look back at your past faithfulness. You can say, I used to. You can say, I used to have a relationship with God. I used to pray. I used to know him really well. But the question isn't what you did. It's who you're becoming. Are you still growing? Are you still listening? Are you still surrendering to him? Finishing well means staying faithful. Not in the big moments, but in the daily choices, the ones that no one sees. It means keeping your eyes on Jesus, even when the road gets hard, or even when the road's too easy. Perhaps the band would like to begin joining me on the stage. We live in a world of rulers. Some of them are bad. Some of them are really bad. And as you think back through history, you'll think of some really, really bad ones. You can probably think of some pretty mediocre ones. And you might even be able to name some good ones. What we see time and time again is that the people who pursue power often aren't suitable for it. And we see that power corrupts. We'd hope that people who pursue power would pursue justice, but that's often not the case. People cling to influence when they should be lifting others up. People choose nepotism over merit. People choose loyalty over integrity. People chase luxury whilst neglecting their poor. People build legacies for themselves instead of building up the people they're meant to serve. It's not new. It was happening thousands of years ago. It's happening today, and it will be happening in the future. At the beginning of the story, the Israelites rejected God's kingship. But they were only partway through the story because there was a king that was coming. And this is a different king. From our vantage point now, we know that that's Jesus. And what a different king he is. Like many rulers, Solomon gathered power and wealth to himself and for his family. Jesus already had all of the power and all of the wealth in heaven, and he gave it up. He humbled himself to be born as a baby in this world. He chose to give up his power and his wealth for you. Solomon started well, but temptation overcame him. He compromised his calling. Jesus stayed faithful. He was exposed to every temptation, and through hard and through good, he never gave up. He never compromised. Solomon put his interests first. Jesus said to God, not by my will, but yours. Solomon enslaved his people to build his kingdom. Jesus came to free those in bondage. He broke the curse of death himself. Solomon collected wives. Jesus has one beautiful bride. Solomon broke the covenant with his adulterous relationships with idols. Jesus is the faithful husband who gives his life for his church. Solomon built himself a palace. Jesus is preparing a room for you in heaven. Solomon took food off his tables, off the tables of people. Jesus is preparing a table for you. Solomon was crowned in gold. Jesus wore a crown of thorns on his head as he was beaten and mocked and crucified. Above his head was a sign, King of the Jews, and it was written out of mockery. But now that's the biggest kingdom that's ever existed. No kingdom has ever reigned as long. Every day is growing. When Solomon's reign ended, the kingdom of Israel split in two. When Jesus breathed his last breath on earth, the curtain in the temple was torn in half, and we could enjoy the presence of God for the first time. Jesus is the king we need, now and forever. And we're going to worship him. We're going to worship together with singing, but we're also going to worship by sharing communion together. As we begin to worship, stewards are going to bring bread and wine for communion. Hang on to it. We're going to take it all together after the first song. Adrian will come up and let us know what to do. Just so you know, our best understanding of the Bible is that sharing bread and wine together is for people who would call Jesus their king. And if that's you today, take it. And if it's not, let it pass you by. That's no problem. But maybe today you want Jesus to be your king. Take the bread, take the wine, hang on to it. Thanks, everyone.
Hey guys, before you go, we just want to say a massive thank you for watching this video today. My name's Chris. I'm part of the leadership team here at the Beacon Church. You know, as a church, we have a big vision. We believe that we exist to help people to know God, to find freedom, to discover their purpose, and to make a difference. If this video has made a difference in your life today, then make sure you check out our other content in our playlist. We believe it's going to really help you out. And don't forget to like and subscribe as you go. Well, that's all from me today. Take care. God bless.